Today we're going to be doing a share out of the user research that was done over the winter. You all know Sam Pianado. He's a designer in the build program at VMware, and he's been leading this effort along with me. So today is the first of 2 sessions. The next session will be at office hours next week, so please join us as well. Today, we'll be digging into the raw data and doing some exercises that will hopefully inspire conversation and gather insights. We figured that since the contributors in this forum will be responsible for putting the findings of the research into action, we didn't want to deliver a pre-packaged slide deck of findings, but instead we want everyone to have a relationship with the data and be able to generate findings and insights that are hopefully relevant and actionable. So what we'll do today, first, I'm going to give a quick background on what we did, what the process was like, and then we'll have 2 sections of silent reading followed by discussion. Sam is going to speak in a little bit more detail about what that looks like. Next week, we're planning to do a review of our assumptions from the beginning, back in January, and then discuss what actions we might take next and what else we'd like to learn. So what did our process look like? We talked to 7 subject matter experts within VMware who are all familiar with Buildpacks. Then we talked to 9 people in the industry who are working with containers every day, but may not have heard about Buildpacks before. This is very intentionally not a large sample size. This qualitative research is intended to get a deep insight into people's experiences and motivations. Think breadth over depth. So please use your best judgment and take things with a grain of salt. Just put that out there. So what did the interviews look like? With the subject matter experts, it was a more free-form conversation, just kind of spitballing. But with the industry interviewees, it was more structured. So we spent the first half of the interview understanding what they do, how they use containers, what they like or dislike about their current build tooling, which was usually Docker, and what they expect from a container build tool. So one of the things we asked them to do was rank 10 features of a container build tool in order of importance to them. We'll be going over that in one of the sections. And then we introduced the concept of Buildpacks, kind of at the high level, and asked for their initial thoughts and observations. So we'll be seeing snippets of what they had to say in this board, if you've taken a peek ahead.
And then we also forgot to add about the usability tests and how we ended up stopping that.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, so we had a plan to take someone who's relatively fresh to Buildpacks and kind of walk through the process of authoring a build pack with them. But what we found was that, if someone's relatively new to Buildpacks, we spent the entire time allocated for the session just kind of explaining what we do and walking them through their first pack build. So we kind of felt that that wasn't the best format for an interview. But we'll hopefully dig into that a little bit more next week when talking about, any future interviews that we'd like to conduct. What should those look like, and who should we talk to? Any questions about the process or, what we plan to do? All right, with that, I'll hand it over to Sam. He's going to describe the next sections.
Awesome. Thanks so much for coming, folks. So we are going to dive right in, and we're going to set off a timer and let everybody read this first section here. We're only going to give you 8 minutes to read this. And I'm sorry for the short amount of time. Please definitely, come back and read more if you're curious. So if you want to scan through it to try to get through it in the 8 minutes, that's totally fine. And then we're going to discuss what do we find interesting, what do we learn, And if you, while you're reading, if you want to use this green chalkboard over on the right and add sticky notes about, what you've learned, um, what do you think we maybe need to make more visible? What existing features of Buildpacks need to be explained better, and what new things can we build to get more adoption? Or any other thoughts that you have. So that chalkboard green area is our workspace. So please go crazy over there and add lots of ideas and thoughts. And with that, I think we will just kick off this silent read. So we're just reading this first whiteboard here. Does anybody have any questions? All right, Natalie, you want to kick off the timer?
Maybe we should have paused the recording.
Cool. So excited to hear people's thoughts. Who would like to jump in with some of what they learned or what they thought was interesting?
I could start with one that maybe I just found a little bit confusing. I'd like to maybe get a little bit more insight. So I think on the, what is it, like the ranked list, if I'm looking at that correctly, like the two most important things for these individuals were the updating, patch releases for application dependencies and for OS packages. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, but then in the contents of the Docker file, it seems like a lot of people didn't know what they were putting in their Docker file. So I feel like there's like a huge, like maybe they want those things, but they don't actually do them on a practical sense or in a practical sense.
Yeah, I think that's a great tension that's really important to bring out. I think that's spot on.
My sense from the interviews that I participated in is it's kind of like this tension between someone saying it's important for me to know everything that's in the file, in the Docker file, and also I really don't know everything that's in the Docker file. It's like identifying that something's important, but also in practice not being able to really meet that expectation.
Like that gap analysis was one of the things that sort of caused us to do the cloud native build pack project in the first place, or let's say Buildpacks generally, was that people wanted that but could not get it with their existing tools. So I think that's actually like very strong backup for the entire foundation of the project we have.
Does that mean, I don't know, maybe I'm jumping the gun here, but I'm kind of thinking of like the target users, right? I think a lot of the cases we aim for the app developer, but it seems like a lot of the feature sets are more in line with DevSecOps.
I believe the way I typically experience this with customers is it's a developer concern in so much as their company requires an outcome, right? It requires a complete inventory that everything's on there, right? A bill of materials. And to the extent that a tool can provide that so that those developers aren't on the hook for it themselves, it does overlap there.
I think this ties into one of my insights. I feel like sometimes when we talk about how much to emphasize security aspects of cloud native build packs, like we know security is important, but sometimes we go back and forth being like, devs don't care about this at all. But I think that the sort of the outcome of asking people to prioritize across a wide range of personas seems to be that a broader range of people care about security than we give them credit for. Maybe they care for different reasons, but it's not just only operators care and devs want to push whatever the heck they want to prod, right? It seems like it is something that a majority of our users are thinking about.
Yeah, I think your idea, Emily, that they care in different ways about it is the key point here. Like there are operators and other people in the back office and enterprises who care as a sort of first class concern about making sure that things are secure. Developers, maybe a better way to phrase it would be developers don't want to care. They just want the answer, right? So that they don't have to introduce all of the added complexity in their day-to-day. They just get a thing that is secure.
It's not like they don't care whether the end result is secure, but they don't want to have to spend a lot of time caring about it.
Easy button.
And
Yeah,
I
that
guess
was-
maybe.
Go
Sorry,
ahead.
All right, I'll just throw that on here. I think one of the things I do want to call out though is like in this ranked list, there's only what, like 11 items, right? And so I feel like maybe we're not getting the full picture either. Like there's probably other things that developers, you know, in doing this survey actually care about a lot more than security patches. That may or may not be true, but I don't know that 11 items on a list is exhaustive enough to know exactly what is the most important thing to them. It's just ranked across other things that we cared about getting the answer for.
Yeah, we don't know that it's the most important thing to them, but we do know that it's important to them, right?
More important than some of the other things on here, yes.
Yeah.
Like documentation. I mean, I'm really surprised by that one.
Yeah, I mean, you always got to be a little skeptical of what people say they want versus what they really need. You know what I mean? So I think we can all take that with a big grain of salt. Ben, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, so I want to jump in and highlight line 4 in this ranked list, total control and flexibility for customization. Anybody want to take a stab at how to reconcile that with the ability to patch, which is generally in direct opposition to that? The easy ability to understand what's in something, which is in direct opposition to that. Like, how do we as a project try and reconcile a priority that's that high compared to other things that it almost can't exist with?
Personally, I think we should call some types of flexibility out of scope. Like, I think we should look at certain cases that we want to support really well and make sure that people have total control and flexibility to change the things they care about in those situations. But I don't think that, you know, if someone who wants to, you know, add IP tables to their image is going to choose a Docker file instead, like, I think that is okay. Like, we don't have to be the best tool for every single type of image build, but we need to solve this need for people who are doing the type of image build we're good at.
I think this leans into like the escape hatch stuff as well. Like, I think if there are, I mean, maybe inline build pack is one way to help mitigate some of this, but the ability to extend a thing that doesn't work. I think I saw that theme a lot with some of the cards that I saw, right? Like the moment it's broke, if I have to like dig into and understand because the assumption is like I can read and understand Docker files. Seems to be like a lot of the, it's like, oh, well, I can at least read the simple DSL. But I guess they aren't reading these like 127 line Python Docker files to kind of set that stuff up. So I doubt like people are reading the from images that they're inheriting some of this stuff from. But even given that, like the fact that I can like edit the thing that's checked in, I think goes a long way for kind of helping with that. So I really think that this is tied a lot to like escape hatching, that people feel like they at least have that out or option, and it's not hard to do. I thought there was an interesting note, even along those lines, of like someone said that they can either edit either the Docker file or their code. And so it seems like it's not like they have to force, they're willing to change their code to make the Docker builds work for them.
Curious to hear from some of the folks who haven't spoken yet, maybe. Gonna make me call on you?
I could share one. Oh, Javier, please go ahead.
I already spoke. That's why I put my hand up. I'll go after someone who hasn't spoken. Go for it, Neto.
I guess I could share, like, for me, what was sort of the deepest takeaway from these conversations, which is that people, you know, they don't love some things about their Docker workflow, but they don't hate it either. They're generally satisfied. I think, you know, sometimes as a CNB contributor who really believes in the value of Buildpacks and is excited about the project, I'm coming with the mindset that, like, yes, everybody knows they have a problem, and, you know, like, let me just explain how Buildpacks will solve that problem. But I think, you know, that's a wrong assumption to make. We should approach these conversations knowing that it's working, kinda, for the most part.
Okay. I guess I'm going to change the topic. So unless somebody has a reply to that, good. Move on. I wanted to maybe unpack the documentation piece a little bit more. And I don't know if I'm really looking for solutioning just yet, but I'd maybe like to know a little bit more of, you know, again, this call out for great documentation was 10 out of 11, right? And I know that we've put that as like a pretty big focus for the roadmap this year, and we felt like we needed it. But I do wonder if there are better alternatives, right? And as I was thinking about it just now, one of the things that kind of resonated was like the ease of use, right? Like how simple it is to write a Docker file. Like the syntax itself is like very minimal, right? That you have to learn. And so I do wonder if there's a better alternative that we could be using as opposed to documentation, right? Like, not to say that documentation is not important, but maybe minimize the efforts there and put them elsewhere. And so one of the things I think about is like, you know, NPM as a very like hand-holdy type of way of, you know, guiding you through the process of whatever you want to do, right? So like you're creating a React application, it like guides you through these like scaffolding processes, right? An error occurs, it kind of like guides you how to fix it, as opposed to like, oh, I got this error, let me go on Stack Overflow and figure out, or let me try to find it in the documentation what this means or what I did wrong. So anyways, just wanted to call that out.
I agree with you that we can make the product itself easier to understand, both with like better error messages and logging, or with the pack interact stuff that Anthony has been describing could get us a long way. Maybe I'm just like willfully trying to explain this away, but I feel like good documentation is table stakes for a tool. It's not like the killer feature, but it is just an expectation of a mature product. Like, is it possible that's why it's so low on the list? It's not a reason you pick something, but it's just something that you need to even have it enter into the category of things that could be picked.
Yeah, like this is a lie from all the participants. They care way more because a documentation being good or not is whether anybody gets beyond opening a home page. Fundamentally, there isn't a good install experience, a good getting started experience. They just leave. It's not like they dislike the product in the way they would if it, you know, they were using it and it had a feature or not. They just don't engage right at the start.
Yeah, I guess maybe I'm framing it more in whether the level of effort, right, of document all the things, which is something that I've said in the past, right, is worth the value, right? And if we could offset that much effort, right, in leverage something else, some other methods that are closer to the end user, as opposed to them having to come to the documentation.
It's an admirable idea, but I think if you just take a look at any open source project that you consider to be successful, Javier, right? Like the one thing they all have in common is really, really, really good docs. There's no anemic documentation on a successful project. As Emily says, it's undervalued because it's considered at table stakes. You don't even get to enter the conversation of this is one of the most important projects in the world without that level of documentation.
Can I disagree a little bit about docs? I do feel like, you know, as someone invested in a product, right? Like there's so many resources out there, Google, Stack Overflow, Slack, whatever, right? You only go to these things because the docs are subpar, right? You go to these things out of frustration, right? Because the thing you're looking for to maybe to build your platform isn't in the search bar in the docs, right? I do feel like docs are great when people are already invested. People, you know, need the right resources to build their business on top of, right? Those are the people that sort of need it, right? And will complain the loudest about it. But like, you know, to get people to read through dry docs, right? You know, it's not very fun to do it, right? They already have to see the value in the product, right? Immediately.
Read through dry docs, I think, is a symptom of bad documentation. But let me ask you, Anthony, the first time you had to install Minikube or install Kind, take your Kubernetes cluster of choice, start at Stack Overflow?
No, but I did not read the docs. I didn't, it was intuitive enough to do it, right? And then I already knew the value of it. And then if I wanted to go a little deeper, then I read the docs. I knew what it was for. A very easy way to get a Kubernetes cluster on my local machine, right?
Yeah.
I didn't need it to be explained to me in a doc.
I don't think that's the docs I'm really talking about. Let's say that. Like, I think going deeper into the product is the docs I'm talking about.
If the docs were missing, I might have given up on some of those things, even though they support what I want. It's like, can I get Kind to talk to my local registry in an insecure way? You know, like something that doesn't work by default. If there's no doc that describes how to make it work, then I'm like, screw this, I'm going to use a different cluster, you know. But if there's a nice how-to, then I'll keep going.
I do think, to Anthony's point, even if you have good docs, I do think the Googleability of that helps a lot. Or even if you don't have good docs, if other people are writing blogs or other things. I know that's like a common out. So like sometimes I often see like kind of maybe it's just new programmers up and coming, like they are not as good at perusing and reading docs, and they definitely will Google something first. And oftentimes the thing that does come up is the documentation, which is a good sign for the documentation and for the indexing because it is being referenced a bunch of places. But yeah, I mean, I do think people tend to, instead of having to navigate the docs and find it themselves, they will just try to Google a thing and then read kind of whatever comes first.
Go for it, Javier, and then I think we will move on to our next section.
Well, I had finished my thing.
Oh, okay, great. Let's do another silent read on section 2. Was that the right amount of time? Do we want a little bit less, a little bit more? All right, let's go with 8 minutes.
Should we kick off the discussion? We lost our 8 minutes are over.
Is Sam still with us?
Maybe. I think his internet connection has been not great. But I guess we'll just open the floor.
Yeah, what did folks find interesting? What did you learn? What questions do you have?
Yeah, I guess I'll got some thoughts, which is when I read a lot of this stuff about difficulties people have adopting it, it just looks like a snowball problem where once we start getting momentum, a lot of this stuff becomes less difficult. But who can we like pull in to start the snowball? And, like who gets so much value out of this project that they can't possibly be like, oh, these other checks against it, which are really just like who's making these, don't weigh that down, right?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. It's super interesting to think about, like, we know that this product can be challenging under certain circumstances for some people. And so who are the people who are so compelled by the value prop that they will be willing to suffer through the challenges of product in order to get the benefits? I think is maybe another way to say what you're saying.
Ben has his hand up.
Yeah, go for it.
What I notice when I read this, every single negative, although maybe every single positive as well, are totally dependent on Buildpack implementations. They are not fundamental to the nature of cloud native Buildpacks. Most devs can't write Buildpacks because they don't know Go. Well, don't write it in Go.
Right.
Failed Buildpack builds are a black box to troubleshoot. Well, write better logs. I love the one that says the logs are explicit and I still don't know what's going on. But it appears that that's probably the same guy who says you can always write a build pack is not an answer. And I guarantee that guy says just write a Docker file is actually always an answer. But like all of these basically look like we have a problem with build pack implementations, not with build packs as a structure. And then I guess the question to ask ourselves, is there something in the nature of build packs that causes them to suffer from all of these things? Or is it because the build pack implementers have opted to do things that are problematic?
I generally agree with that, except I think there is a little case here where it's like the extensibility of, or like that, you know, like when something goes wrong, you're just kind of stuck in a way that you aren't with Dockerfile. Like that is sort of inherent to build packs. And there are things we can do about that, but I mean, I generally agree with you.
Can you elaborate on that particular point? I'm interested in that.
I think, so I think I don't want to like jump to solution, but I think like what, in particular in that top row in the middle there is like begging for the inline build pack, where it's like, I can just drop this thing in my repo and it runs this extra command, like rake db migrate or whatever, you know? So, and I think that's like, that is an inherent limitation of build packs, but I don't know, I mean, I still totally agree with you about the implementation point.
Well, another sort of framing on it might be like, how might we better support our build pack implementer teams and projects that are associated so that, help them, conform to what we believe might be some best practices around doing this to resolve this. How could we potentially, be advisors or thought leaders to them to avoid some of these pitfalls?
Emily?
I got a couple things. One is, as much as people said they didn't care about documentation, like half of the usability complaints in here were like, this one thing wasn't in the docs. I didn't know I could do this because it wasn't in the docs. So I do think that that's a signal that people care about usability, and part of that is documentation, even if they don't make that connection themselves. The sort of off the wall thing I was wondering is, could we write some sort of shim that would turn a Docker file into a build pack if people want to be familiar with the syntax like that? Like, it runs in the appter and commands like, label, run, env, entry point. You could take that and turn that all into build pack output instead of just executing it. It might be a bit of a hacky thing, but it could get people going.
Every time, like we talk about this once a year, it feels like, and every time it comes right up until the moment you run a command, right? Like you can't apt-get, you can't run that. You can't just untar into an arbitrary location.
Yeah, there's certain types of commands you can't run, but I wonder if just the syntax there would help people get started, and we could document what the limitations are.
But isn't the answer to that actually not to adopt Dockerfile syntax, but to have a DSL?
Yeah, a simple DSL, maybe a simple DSL that looks like, I guess this gets into the whole, what was it called, pack file thing?
Exactly.
But I wonder if just making something look familiar would get more people being willing to try it and work through the pain points.
Yep.
Because I don't know if TOML is exciting to people like that. They're not, I don't know if people look at TOML and think like, oh yeah, I totally know what to do here. Like maybe we need to revisit pack file, but with a simpler, flatter interface.
You want to share, Terrence?
I was just going to comment on Emily's comment. Like, I wonder if that's what inline build pack. If inline build pack is not solving that problem you're saying, Emily, then maybe we're not doing it right. Maybe we do need to eject out of TOML, but I I do think like that is kind of the goal, right? Like, let's make it easy for people to kind of do this stuff, but we do have more restrictions. And so I think we should be making it possible for people to kind of really easily write stuff that you probably would write in a Docker file, given those constraints.
I guess like I'm optimistic about inline build packs, but right now it's a place where you can write a build pack in Bash, but you still need to know like I need to put a thing in layer/bin if I want it to be on the path. I need to write a launch toml with my labels if I want to write a label. I wonder if just like sort of building some of that stuff in so that you don't need to know about like maybe the Buildpack API is confusing such that even if we have an easy way for you to write one in Bash, it's still hard.
Yeah, I think that was kind of my point. Like maybe we're at the wrong abstraction level for inline Buildpack to kind of what you're getting at, right? Like maybe we need to restrict even more what you can do with inline Buildpack if we want it to solve that purpose.
I'm curious about maybe some thoughts from folks who haven't gotten a chance to speak yet. Yael or Juan or Sam.
Yeah, I put some sticky notes.
Anything you want to share? No pressure.
I put some sticky notes. Since people are just it looks like people are keep telling like how Docker is so great and they trust it and they like, it's very easy to get familiar with this. So I don't remember the point where I started working with Docker files. So I don't remember what made me like feel comfortable with this, but I'm wondering if we can do something very similar to our project. So people can trust us more or it will be easier for them to be more familiar with this project. I'm not sure how to, we should try to pick someone that is not familiar with Docker and see how he gets familiar with this. But yeah, personally, I just don't remember how it happened to me.
Yeah, from my perspective, and I'm new in this project and I didn't know about it before. So for me, it's more time working with Docker or doing that than doing it with Buildpack. But one of the things I notice is people likes what if the product is, well, it's been used for everybody and they said it's using, because if I'm going to use something that nobody's using, I'm not going to be the first one, right? And at the beginning, I remember with Docker, it was hard to the companies to go into the containers wars and stuff, right? Then at some point, everybody was using it. So the company says, okay, we have to move to this container stuff. I don't know how we are going to do it, but we have to do it because everybody's using it and everybody is moving to that. So they start using Docker and everybody start learning Docker. And right now you can pick up someone in IT world and, do you know Docker? Yes, I know. Or if they don't, they heard something about it. And that's what companies likes and that's what they want, to use something and to adopt something. They need to know that everybody's using it, and after you get into that point, then you can improve the documentation and stuff. And because at the beginning the documentation from Docker was not so good, but they reached that point where everybody was using it, and it, and then you move there. So I think and when I can see Buildpack, I know that if we are able somehow, I'm not sure, I just 2 weeks here. So, but if we are able to, to get into that point where, I don't know, some huge partner it's using, and they said, I'm using Buildpack, and Buildpack solved me these issues and this stuff. So probably some others are going to listen and say, but that guy solved his problems with Buildpack. So let me try to do it. And if we are able to hit that, probably we'll reach some popularity, and then people will go into and try to understand how it works, and all these things that they're saying it's difficult, or it's probably we can improve it, and obviously we can do that. But I believe the thing is how we can hit some popularity with the tool, because after that everything else will become, probably the guys that says, no, I prefer to go to Docker, it's better because I already know it. No, probably with Kubernetes was the same thing at the beginning. Nobody was using it. At some point, popularity was reached, and then everybody start talking about Kubernetes and everything. So that's what I feel from the comments and stuff. For me, popularity is actually the key point in the game. If we do that, then everything else will be more easy because we have many people on our shoulders. But I don't know how exactly to reach it. But yeah, that's my thoughts.
Yeah, totally. I know we're at the top of the hour here, so if folks need to leave, that's fine. I see Sam has hand raised. Just want to give him a chance to speak, and then hope to see you all next week. And we're gonna do more, dig into some of the initial assumptions that we validated and invalidated. Talk about those, and then also talk about next steps and action items. So hope to see you same time next week. But before we break, wanted to hear from you, Sam.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring up that point about someone new to Docker learning Docker files. I think, like, I've seen new hires completely new to Dockerfile, like, start with it, and they can read a Dockerfile like they're reading bash scripts or like something else they're familiar with, where they know run, that means this command would be run, copy means something would be copied, or like at least those two basic instructions are very easy for someone to understand, even if they don't know what Docker is or what's happening underneath. And even if you compare some like really similar tool, which does have similar operations like Builder, which has like a run or copy command, like because it exposes something slightly, like it exposes the fact that you're running some other random command, which is creating these OCI layers, that gets a bit harder for people to grasp, as opposed to simply saying that, okay, I don't care about OCI images, I just care about, okay, these are the random series of commands that I have to run. And the output would be like, if I start from this base image, I'm running these commands, that's my output. They don't care about what's happening underneath. And being able to provide something similarly intuitive is, I think, what would help people who are new to the project adopt it. Currently, Buildpacks are shortened in like so many terms and layers that people don't even, like, as soon as they start, they give up. And unless they really, really want to have, like, they are sort of looking at these features and resonating with their past problems, at which point there are probably some DevSecOps person who's like dealing with it on a large scale rather than a singular person. So maybe the target audience for Buildpacks is not like single app devs, or it's probably like people who have already had these issues and they care about consistency and they're willing to spend all this extra time and effort to provide that. But if we want to make it more intuitive, I think we need some way to just translate like things people are already familiar with, like Bash or something they really start out at the very beginning with, like Linux and Unix, and translate that into Buildpack concepts.
Back to the DSL idea, right? Or pack file. It's interesting. All right, Sam, I think, do you want to say bye, Pinado?
I think that's all for today, folks. Thank you all so much. Looking forward to talking again next week. Do one more read and then next steps and action items. So thank you again.